Nearly a month that this war has gone on, and we want to highlight in our next report what's played out so far in Ukraine. How far have Russian troops really progressed as far as the invasion plan is concerned? They haven't managed to capture some of the key cities, which they were perhaps hoping to do 29 days into this war. What stopped them? And what's been the international response in the last few weeks? Have countries, particularly the West, NATO, have they done enough to actually help Ukraine? We tell you more on that.
I decided to conduct a special military operation. It aims to protect people who have been bullied and subjected to genocide by Kiev regime for 8 years.
It all started with an early morning broadcast that stunned the world. The future of millions of Ukrainians changed with the blink of an eye. Now, a month and counting, Ukraine has survived ruthless bombing, brutal attacks, and endless hellscape. Russian forces are struggling to capture key Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv and Kharkiv. Kyiv still stands firm. Heavily outnumbered and outmuscled, yet Ukraine is giving them a bloody nose.
I thank everyone who acts in support of Ukraine, in support of freedom, but the war continues. The acts of terror against peaceful people go on. 1 month already. That's long. It breaks my heart, hearts of all Ukrainians and every free person on the planet.
The war has spared no one. Toddlers, kids, youngsters, elderly, all victims. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, over 10 million people have fled their homes, mostly women and children. With each passing hour, Ukraine war is fast becoming the fastest growing humanitarian crisis Europe has seen since the Second World War. Diplomatic efforts are on to secure a ceasefire, and yet reports of civilian deaths in Ukrainian cities continue to make headlines. Once a bustling, lively and colorful country, many Ukrainian cities are becoming ghost towns. Bureau Report, India Today.
From all the updates that we're picking up on the Ukraine war, from what our reporters also have been telling us, one thing is very clear, that this war hasn't gone the way Vladimir Putin or Russia really expected. Imagine this, Russia's air power, their military might is 5 times bigger than that of Ukraine. And yet 29 days on, this war is raging on with none of the mega cities like Kharkiv or Kyiv really under Russian control. And that's why in our next report, we talk about what's really gone wrong for Putin. Did he miscalculate how this war would happen? And what are his options going forward now? How long is this conflict going to rage on?
Simply put, it's an epic David versus Goliath story. Russia outranks Ukraine in active military personnel strength 5-1. Moscow has 6 times more combat jets than Kyiv. Putin's defense budget is 10 times that of Zelensky's. Technically, Ukraine should have been defeated in a matter of days. But in a real war theater, that's not the case. There are many variables and many dynamics. The war here has been very, very different. Bruised, battered and besieged Kyiv is still fighting and giving a bloody nose to Putin's war machine and his fabled army. 4 weeks and counting, but Russia has been unable to use its military and air power to the fullest. So what exactly afflicts the Russian president's war? Sample this. A full frontal infantry assault by Russia would result in far bigger numbers of fatalities. Cities cannot simply be won by punishing firepower. Capturing them demands closing in and creating footholds at the periphery and eventually getting inside. But given Ukraine's resilience, that will mean countless casualties. Does Moscow have the stomach for that? Since Russia began the invasion, there has been no major physical combat to capture territory. Russian tanks and other specialized war vehicles have been stalled at many war fronts, often suffering heavy damage. Powerful Russian armor has fallen prey to next-generation light anti-tank weapons supplied by the West and NATO. The Javelin anti-tank missiles and Bayraktar drones from Turkey have proven nemesis to the Russian army, which has failed to root out pockets of resistance. Russia's famed air force and attack helicopters are often seen struggling against ragtag Ukrainian air force and determined fighters armed with shoulder-fired missiles supplied by the West. Russia almost being seen as reluctant to deploy its manpower to the fullest to capture Ukraine's capital Kyiv, dragging the war into an endless, grinding bombing mission. Putin also didn't bargain for the body bags of Russian soldiers. Since his country has witnessed the biggest drop in population since World War II, owing to a falling fertility rate in Russia, which translates into losing close to 10 lakh people alone in the year-long period between October 2020 and September 2021. The declining birth rates can potentially reduce Russia's 14.5 crore population to 13.6 crores by 2040. Russia has also failed miserably to read asymmetric warfare on the ground in Ukraine. It aimed to finish the invasion in 3 days flat, but Putin's tanks ran dry in just 72 hours into the invasion with a lack of refills, maintenance, and a crippled logistics supply. The struggling Russian war machine moves with a month into this invasion. The struggles on the ground for Russia could prove disastrous, not just in Ukraine, but overall for Putin. Bureau Report, India Today.
In the last many weeks, there's also been extremely harsh criticism of the West, of its response to this war and the kind of help, assistance that they've been giving to Ukraine. For example, one of the basic demands that Ukraine has been putting forth is to go ahead and impose a no-fly zone, which is something that the West, neither has NATO, agreed to. And amid all of this, US President Joe Biden is in fact visiting Europe. He's landed in Brussels. He's going to also be making his way to parts of Poland. Now, he is going to be making his way to Warsaw in a few days from now. But this particular visit is also extremely crucial because it's all about the messaging that the United States is trying to send across to Russia. Biden is in Europe essentially to reaffirm Western alliances amid Russian aggression. The US president will attend NATO, will attend the G7 and European Union summits. He's also expected to be announcing new sanctions against Russia during this visit. Russia's action in Ukraine has isolated Russia further, in fact, and returned the world to the times of Cold War. The war has put Russia in direct confrontation with the United States. Putin had warned the West clearly not to interfere with its invasion or they will face grave consequences. As far as the United States response is concerned, it has faced quite a bit of criticism, including from Zelensky, who called out the NATO, saying that they must very clearly state that they too are scared of Russia. And let's get you a ground report by Gaurav Sawant. He is currently in Poland and he travelled towards the border just kilometers away from Ukraine, where American troops are currently stationed to ensure that there's adequate border security for a NATO ally like Poland.
The military tents that you see behind me are the new American camps that have come up. We are about 300 kilometers from Poland's capital, Warsaw. We are currently in a place called Mokre Jamosh. This is an airfield. And if you notice in this airfield, there are a number of tents that have come up. These tents are the new American airbase that's been set up in Poland. Now, there are a large number of American troops who are now deployed in this area. Now, if you look just behind me there, that entire green cover are American military tents. They have American military hardware, from armored personnel carriers to Humvees to certain radars that have been set up to troop carriers that have come up in this area. And they've come up from mid-March to now, and the numbers are increasing. This is an airfield. That's the airfield. This is the Mokre Jamosh airfield. This is barely 50 kilometers from Ukraine's border. And civilian movement in this area is now restricted. This entire area is not only barricaded, but you have American troops deployed at every entrance to this airfield. Now, are these American troops here as part of a North Atlantic Treaty Organization country, NATO military exercise? They started coming here. The initial troops or the pioneers came in between mid to end February, and the larger number of troops are still coming in. We spoke to some of these soldiers, but they said they're not cleared to speak to media about the nature of the deployment or the duration of the deployment in Poland, close to the border with Ukraine. But there are radars that are here, there are Humvees that are here, and there are certain other military hardware that is coming in to this area, is what locals tell India today. US President Joe Biden is also to fly in to Warsaw for talks with Poland. Now, while that is a lot to do also with humanitarian assistance that will be provided to Poland for Poland looking after more than 2 million refugees who've come in from Ukraine. But Poland is also looking for additional military hardware, from surface to air missiles to fighter jets from the United States, and more troops on ground. America did commit to about 3,000 additional troops being sent here. 7,000 American troops as part of rotation are in the NATO territory right now. But Poland wants more to strengthen its security, especially with Russian missiles falling very close to Poland's border with Ukraine. With cameraman Lalit Joshi in Poland, Gaurav Sawant for India Today.
And amid all of these tit-for-tat steps, and particularly the sanctions that have been imposed by the West and several other countries against Russia, it's the Russians, the commoners, who are struggling. Putin says that it has no effect on the economy. But our reporters on the ground, Geeta Mohan, who's been reporting for us non-stop from Moscow, tells us that people are very much feeling the heat of the sanctions.
Russia is battling two wars. One on the ground it is waging on Ukraine, the other the economic one inflicted on them by Ukraine's Western allies. Russia is facing the worst economic crisis it has faced in 20 years. But on the streets in Moscow, there is calm. The Russian government has been telling citizens there is no shortage of food and essentials. While the Western banks have closed operations, Russian banks are functioning as normal.
Are the banks working normally? Can you withdraw money? Are you facing problems?
No, I don't have problems.
Okay. Is there any difficulty with regards to banking in Russia?
No.
Alpha Bank is one of the largest banks in Russia and is open. Speaking to a few people over here, they say that they've not had any problems, although Moscow did hit the panic button after the 24th of February, and many of them queued up outside of ATM machines. But it seems like right now things have gone back to normal because they are being able to withdraw money.
Many Western companies have shut outlets in Russia in the wake of the invasion. The citizens are inconvenienced but are standing by its government.
Now I can pay only Russian clothes. It's normal, okay. But I like different countries from different countries clothes. This is no important problem.
How is Russia going to tide over the crisis? Will the two sides, West, Russia, Ukraine and Russia, come to a negotiated settlement to ensure that this crisis comes to an end? Or will there be more humanitarian crisis, not just in Ukraine, but also with the global economy taking a beating and people suffering economically? Outside the Bolshoi Theatre, with video journalist Satya Rautre in Moscow, Geeta Mohan for India Today.
As expected, it's not just Russians, but the entire world that's really struggling because of all of these sanctions. Now, an interesting announcement that was made by Russian President Vladimir Putin was that for what he deemed as unfriendly countries, the payment for gas sales from Russia will be done in Russian currency, in ruble. And because of this, there's a huge crisis that's playing out, again leading to gas prices soaring in parts of Europe.